Hi there, welcome back to Brothers of the Arcana. As always, I am Alex Aldea.
I am Dave Ferrigno.
And I am Paulo Santos.
Excellent. And Paulo's joining us today to tell us, frankly, an amazing story. We started chatting last week. We met up at the Park Avenue Club in Whippany, New Jersey.
Florham Park, actually.
I'm sorry, in Florham Park, New Jersey. And before we get into that, we'll introduce our cigars of the day. So I have the Herrera Esteli Norteño by Drew Estates. What do you got there,
I have the Liga Privada H99 by Drew Estate.
Oh, that's very nice.
And I also have a Drew Estate Pancetta with me here.
Yes, and those are ones that are tough to find. Only a couple places around the country do they sell those. Hi.
Two to be exact.
And we're joined by a real celebrity today. Ming Chen is in the podcast space. Hello, Ming. And he's helping us out with producing capabilities this afternoon. So we're extremely grateful to Ming for being with us and helping us out and getting us waters and everything we need to have here, which is really cool. So
got to stay hydrated.
Absolutely. So Paulo and I started chatting over at a cigar club this past week, and I was so impressed with what he has going on and what he lived through, frankly, that we had to have him on the podcast to record his story. Very esoteric, very interesting. So without further ado, Paulo, would you kindly introduce yourself to our listeners and give us a sense of who you are and what you got going on?
Sure. Paulo Santos. I guess we'll start with what I do.
Sure.
I guess.
Yeah.
So I run a AI-based tech business development lead generation firm. Been doing that. Basically, I resigned from my job of 18 years 2 weeks after I woke up from a coma 4 years ago.
And we'll definitely talk about that.
We'll get into all that stuff.
Sure.
But the whole basis of it was actually a AI system that I wrote while I was in a coma.
Wow.
It's incredible.
I woke up and spent 3 days no sleeping, coding. Came up with a system that, if you've ever coded, north of 85,000 lines of code, compiled with 0 errors. First time it's ever happened to me in my life.
Wow.
And it springboarded the company from there, and really having a lot of fun with it, and doing some really cool stuff that I never really thought I'd be doing in this world. To be honest with you. So, but I guess why I'm here. Some more of my background was 4 years ago, I caught COVID, March 2020. This was pre-shutdown. And March 5th in 2020, I was hosting an executive event at a Seton Hall basketball game at Peru Center. March 6th, I'm on a train to D.C. For a dinner. Come back home the next day. 10 days later, I am in the hospital. Well, 3 days later, I will flatline and be intubated for a few weeks and then wake up on my 39th birthday. And that kind of brought me to where we are today. Kind of a strange background to get me here, but I wouldn't trade it for the world.
So you told me some stuff. Number one, that before you went into the coma, you were seeing body bags piled up like cordwood. Yeah. I mean, there's just people dropping like flies. So that had to be, a weird foreshadowing of like what's going to happen to me.
Look at
all this stuff that's happening now. So
March 15th, 14th-ish, I started feeling the symptoms for the first time. And, I didn't have that hacking cough that everybody had just yet. All I really had was really crazy bad fevers. We did telemedicine for the first time. I spoke to a doctor. They're like, go take some Tamiflu. It sounds like the flu.
Mm-hmm.
March 17th, the morning of March 17th, I was in my basement. My wife had already said, get out from here, go downstairs, quarantine yourself. And I'm having some of the most insane fever, like hallucinations.
Yes.
And I don't even know how high I was hitting. I think it's 103, 104-ish in the fever scale. And I'm imagining people are chasing me in my basement. There's like weird shadows following me around, all sorts of weird stuff. And I'm like, okay, this isn't right. I'm going to go get me to the hospital. Get to the hospital March 17th. They say it'll take 3 days for the COVID test to come back, because that's what it was back then. And told me I have double pneumonia. And they were kind of shocked I was even walking at this point, because my blood oxygen level was so low. Like, I should not be able to function at this point. Get into the hospital, and the first night of the hospital, the ER was empty. And once they admitted me, I looked outside and I realized just setting up a tent outside for intake, which has never been done before, but I'm witnessing this happen for the very first time. And I'm like, oh man, this is a real thing.
Yeah.
Like whatever's happening is actually going to be happening. And we, my wife and my family weren't allowed to visit me. They would park at the parking lot, and I would blink the lights on so they knew which room I was in, and they would kind of be waving to me kind of thing while they're on the phone. And that first night, I remember just hearing like the alarms go off every hour. And they were pulling another body out of the rooms. Now, I had a solo room, but you did have a window into the main hallway, and you could see them all the time, frequently being pulled in, or you'd hear like emergency response teams coming in with their carts for the paddles and all that stuff. And, it's a frightening feeling knowing that whatever all these people have, you got too. It's in your body. It's functioning. It's working its magic and pain in your body. And not to mention that I am feeling progressively worse at the same time. It's not like I'm feeling better just because I'm at the hospital.
Sure.
They had no treatments yet. They were all trying to figure out what might work, what might not work. So they were just trying their best to the point where, it's a scary feeling watching everyone die. And the 19th, the day before I went and got intubated, I made goodbye videos to my family. One of the craziest things I've ever had to do. I actually remember taking out like my the oxygen out of my nose, try to look a little bit decent, fixing my hair when I had it. I sat up straight and I said, okay, let me look decent, because if this is my goodbye video, I don't want to look like patient zero here, right? And I made videos. I sent it to one of my family members to give to my wife if ever there's a problem. I took all my financial data, put it into a nice, clean little Excel file, sent it to my sister because I knew my wife would be too, messed up at the time. And then I did all sorts of weird stuff. Like I ordered like 4 months worth of diapers or like 5,000 ice packs off of Amazon for some reason because I'm delusional at this point. My fever's high. But you're going through all these things and your mind is just like prepping. And I was in my head, I'm preparing for a world without me. So even things like buying diapers for my then baby at the time, to make sure that my wife didn't have to worry about it, right, was stuff that was in my head. I called my life insurance guy. Hey, just making sure I'm up to date with my premiums, making sure my wife's going to be good to go. And you really don't think about these things until you're at that moment.
Yeah.
And it was a very eye-opening experience. And at some point, you were just like, okay, what else do I have to do if I do die? And do I have everything in order? And I spent, I guess, a day or two just getting everything in order.
Sure.
And if that was it, then that was it. But at least I think I did everything I had to do for my family at that moment to be okay with it.
And then
the 20th happens. I am FaceTiming with my wife. Next thing I know, I'm wake up somewhere else. And according to her, we were FaceTiming, and then next thing she knows, she was FaceTiming the ceiling. Phone just drops flat, and she has no idea what happened to me. Right? So I went down.
It's fantastic. You start telling the story, it's 11:11.
There you go.
It's incredible.
Always timing. Always timing.
Synchronicities are just beyond understanding. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I was first hospitalized at Central State Hospital in Freehold. Mm-hmm. Right? I know that room back and forth. Been there for a few days already. Basically been my house, right? When I stopped breathing and I went down, I was in another hospital room. It was about the size of this room, give or take, but drastically different.
No, this is the hospital room in your mind.
In my mind,
okay.
Right? Drastically different. The room was dark, but not completely devoid of light. There was still, the machines were there, the little, things telling me what my pulse was, my blood pressure, all that kind of stuff was around. In front of me, so my bed is here. My feet are facing out from me, and in front of me is a glass wall facing out into the nurse's station. where there's nobody there. The lights are off, but there's still a glow from like the exit light. So there, you could still see the framework of a table where they would be, some hallways and stuff, but you just can't get there. My room was this regular old me in a bed, bunch of little things on poles that are all connected to me somehow, some way. And my very first words out of my mouth was, I think I'm dying now. And no fear.
Didn't bother you?
Didn't bother me.
Okay.
No anger, no wonderment. It was just matter of fact. I am dying now. And I don't know how long I was there for. I don't even know how I got there. I was just in the room. And if you look around the room, there's just tons of details in the room that I could still pinpoint. I mean, there was the whiteboard where nurses would write like their name on, what day it is, that stuff. You know, what's wrong with me, notes for the doctor or incoming nurses. There was this weird carpet on the floor. There was a curtain, a lamppost to my far left corner. And something was weird in the room that it never really began or ended as far as time goes. Like I could have been there for 1,000 years or 5 seconds. I just didn't feel like there was an urgency or impatience or waiting. You were just kind of there, which is a very strange feeling.
All the stuff that you were seeing, all the machines and everything, did it feel perfunctory, like it's a movie set with props, or did it actually feel like a hospital room?
It always felt like a hospital room.
Okay.
It definitely felt like a hospital room. Except for the fact that there was nobody around. It was just me in that space, which is not like a hospital room, right?
Right.
So something happened. And it was the first time I heard a sound that wasn't a machine beeping or myself tapping or thinking. And I don't even know how long it was before I heard the sound. And I heard this woman like screaming, praying for me. And it was like, no, not this one, not today. No, not him. Not him. Please, God, no, please, not him. And I was just like, where's this coming from? So I would close my eyes. And you ever watch, I want to say it's Aladdin or one of these like Disney movies where, you know, they're in the desert and the sand starts swirling. Mm-hmm. So imagine, if you close your eyes, imagine a wall of black sand in front of you. This big wall of black sand. But make it almost have a liquidy feel. So it has motion to it. Like if you threw a rock in it, it would ripple. Okay, so take that dark, deep black sand and start from the middle and start swirling it slowly. Right, so the whole sand is now in motion. So I would close my eyes and this image would show up in my head, this black sand, and it would just start swirling all of a sudden. And then the smallest drop of color would take over in the middle of the black sands, and suddenly more of that color would start being added to it, more and more and more, until eventually it's overtaking the entire black sands. But instead of it just being now a different color of sand, it encompasses a scene. So the first color that dropped in was this really dark maroon color. And the first image that started forming was a nurse. Mid-40s-ish, maybe 50s, dark hair, and she was wearing dark red scrubs. And the image was her, and I could see her praying in her head for me as she stood in the back of the room as they're trying to fix my body, which has just gone down, right?
So you're seeing, so one of the walls did this?
No.
The sand?
So imagine an entire scene of black sand, and then it suddenly turns dark red, and it starts getting more and more red, and then the whole red focuses on this woman's scrubs, then the whole scene opens up, and it's a woman in the back of the room, of my real hospital room, and she's praying for me, and I could hear her praying for me, like screaming, God, please, no, not this one, not tonight, that kind of stuff. But it was all based around that dark red start. That's how it started.
Sure.
And then a second later, it was gone. And I'm back in my other hospital room, you know, in this weird place, all the lights off. And I'm like, I missed the scene. I closed my eyes again and just started doing it again. This time it was a pale yellow tone. This
Was
one,
it always black in the beginning and then
always
the colors
starts black.
got added?
Always starts black. This very palish yellow tone, and then it started taking the scene of all the walls in the hospital, in my hospital room, and I'm watching the team work on my body, trying to revive me, and I could see the 2 people above my head. They had pushed my bed out about 3 feet from the wall to get behind me. They had the machine there to intubate me and put the respirator on. There were 2 young nurses standing on the wall to the right, and they were very young, and they weren't even allowed to be in there because at the time of COVID, you can't have more than 1 person in the room. They were only allowed to have 2 people while they were putting the machinery on me, but these nurses snuck back in because they wanted to make sure that I was okay. And I watched them as they shoved the tube down my throat and bring me back to life and make sure I'm breathing, all that kind of stuff. And a second later, I missed the scene and I'm back to that room again. This would happen 30 or 40 or 50 different times. And I mean, I went to the part where I would be revived and my sister and her family are being told that I just died. I would watch as my funeral would happen. And another scene would happen. And then these weird scenes where I would watch like the doctors that were taking care of me at home with their wife having like spaghetti dinners that night, right? Now, the fun part about this, and the reason this story is kind of fun with these little look backs and these black sand spinning, 2 years after I woke up, I would meet the nurses and doctors that took care of me. And their locations in that room, what happened that night, had been verified by them. They were very clear where they were standing, who was in the room, and all that kind of stuff. Even the doctors that were out having spaghetti dinners that night, I could tell them where they were, even if they weren't in the hospital that night, and what they were wearing, where they were having. A lot of this stuff was verified by the individuals that I had seen, which is, to me, it was mind blowing. But it also gave me a little bit of vindication that maybe I wasn't just hallucinating everything that was happening to me. But yeah, so that was the first part of it all. Like I would just see different experiences and witnessing things that, my body getting revived, not getting revived, dying, not dying. And that was more of these, I guess, random scenarios that all started the death sequence, if you will, right?
Okay. So you said several things to me when we met up. Number one, that you lived, let's say, 1,000 lifetimes, more or less. You went to hell, you went to purgatory, you went to heaven, and probably several other places. Give me the chronology of how it broke down, if you remember. How did it sort of go?
I'll give you a chronology, but that's not fair.
Okay.
Only because chronology
it
doesn't
implies
exist
time,
when
right?
time doesn't exist. But I'll give you a period of it. So I will say that that first period was what I just told you. I'm in that hospital room, and I'm seeing different black sand scenarios, if you want to call them that, right? So after that happens, after 30, 40 of those iterations, I'm back in the dark hospital room. And then the lights just turned on. And there was kind of movement and life everywhere. Not necessarily people, but you could feel like the room, like the hospital was alive again. I could see out the window and the lights were on and stuff, right? Somebody walks in the room. And he's about 30, 35 years old, younger guy, good shape, brownish blonde hair. Walks right up to me, to my bedside, puts his hand on my chest. Paulo, you're dying now. Not that I'm dead. He just says, you're dying now. My response? Okay. Okay.
You're going to argue with him?
Yeah, but there was for some reason, the fear factor and that stuff just didn't exist. It was just matter of fact. You're dying now.
Was it death?
And I don't think so. No, I don't think he was death. I would go into this whole conversation with him about, like, okay, so what's next? My first thing is, okay, is this death? Is this me dying? Just me sitting in this hospital room for eternity? Because that doesn't seem like it's a very cool afterlife. Right. But he goes, no, there's a whole structure. And
there's a whole menu.
There's a whole structure. Which
you have a little clipboard to go through everything.
Right.
It's a real omakase moment.
Right.
Yes,
but to be fair, for me, I think it was how I needed to be explained to. My background is computers and tech and math. I like logic. I like step-by-step things. Death isn't necessarily step-by-step or chronological, right? There's no organization. But it was given to me in a very organized way because that's how I processed it.
You preferred to have it.
I preferred to have it.
Sure.
And because of that, there was no fear. Right. So he goes, all right, so here's what's going to happen first. First, you're going to get a gift. And the gift was, you don't have to be dead to experience, you don't have to be alive to experience life. You can live.
I see what you mean.
We're going to let you see lives and lifetimes and do things you wanted to do, see things you wanted to see, watch your kids grow up, watch them do all their cool stuff, get married, proms, whatever. And you can do that for as long as you want. And then when you're ready, we'll go forward. I thought that was the greatest gift I could ever get. So I got 2 kids. My daughter was 6 at the time. My son was 1 at the time. 2 at the time. And let this guy saying that I could still experience them was pretty cool.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Now I experienced, like I told you, multiple versions of what that would mean, and I didn't know that was going to happen. Right. So there was one scenario that I would be alive for portions of it, but most of the scenarios I was just allowed to witness things happen
Without you, so to
without
speak.
me.
Yeah.
Like, what if I did die? What if I was dead right now? What would the rest of the world look like without me? Right.
It's a real Jimmy Stewart moment.
Right.
Yeah.
And the real, pretty much, right? Yeah. But the rest of the world, I was just a drop in the bucket. It was just another thing. But my world was just my family, right? For me, that was my world. And after this angel told me we would be able to experience it, he goes, let's go. And next thing I know, I am living a lifetime after lifetime after lifetime over and over again in different scenarios. In one lifetime, I thought it's great. I watched my daughter go to her prom. I watched her get proposed to. I mean, I know the guy's freaking name, right? I saw them get proposed. I saw her wedding. I saw her have her first kid, all the way until the kid grew up and died, right? Like that's a lifetime. That's 100 years right there, right? You're going at it. And I watched another scenario where my son got married, and I could see the girl, beautiful long hair. I was like, oh my God, I'm so proud of you, kind of thing. And you have those moments, but I wasn't there alive. I was just around. I call these my ghost years. I think it's just a funny thing because it's fun. I was a ghost. Sure. And sometimes I'd be so aggravated that I wasn't involved in life that I would knock stuff off the shelves, like out of my own will, right? Or I would try to make noise and attention and stuff, and I tried to, and I just call those my ghost years because I don't really know what else to call them. But that period of my death, while I was dead years, I mean, there was just scenario after scenario. And, for some points, my family was great. Some points I would watch my family have hardships, and that was really hard to experience. Absolutely. But, at the end of the day, I thought it was such a great gift because it gave me one really good answer. Their life will go on without me. And as a father and a husband, that's kind of really all you want. Right? Do you have to be around for them to be happy and have a great life? Right? And could you provide for them to the point where, they're still going to be okay? And I didn't feel guilty for leaving them.
You said you experienced several iterations, or some of it was you were there for,
Yes.
some of it you were not. Did you feel like qualitatively they had a better life when you were there or when you weren't there? And I know that's probably a hard question to answer. But.
Better and worse, I'm not sure if I could identify that, but they had a life.
Maybe richer with your involvement rather than without your involvement?
There were scenarios that was a yes. There were scenarios that was a no.
Interesting.
right? So I'll tell you a scenario where I was there, and that's definitely going to be a no scenario, right? So I love this story. I tell it a lot. There was this whole timeline where I had an affair with a woman.
This, yeah.
I had an affair with a woman. And I'm not sure exactly how the scene got there, but I remember the first part of it was I was at a bar and I was talking it up with this woman, and she must have been this, maybe 5-10 years younger than me. Her family had just moved, her and her husband had just moved into town. She was married. Her and her husband had just moved into town. And we started it up for a few months in secret.
Good.
The next thing I know, I'm driving to her house. On my passenger side seat, there's a handgun. I'm about to do something bad. I'm going to do something bad. I get there and she comes out screaming. Her husband comes out with a gun and shoots me. As I turn around, and shoots actually the back of my legs and my butt. The cops arrive and they beat the crap out of me because I'm resisting everything and I have a gun in my hand, everything else, right? I would then wake up back in a version of that hospital room that I was in, right? This time I'm handcuffed to the bed and I'm wearing like a white t-shirt and khaki shorts. I'm like, am I wearing like prison outfit? I'm not even sure what's going on. And there's a piece of paper on the wall that says I have a court date on Tuesday. And my legs are battered. Like it's black and blue all the way. I can't move, I can't walk, right? And in my brain, I'm like, what the heck just happened? Right? So I close my eyes. I'm like, okay, I've been in this world before. I can undo this. So I close my eyes. Okay, how do I get back to another timeline? Remember, I was still kind of in control here, right? This is, this is still my death. I can do whatever I want in my death, right?
Sure, yeah.
So I close my eyes, and next thing I know, it's, I guess, 4 weeks later. I'd had my court date. I got out, right? I escaped, prison sentence, whatever else. What's the first thing I do? I go back and find the woman. Right? I go back and find the woman. I'm obsessed.
Right.
I have no idea who this woman is, by the way. It's not a real person, right? I have a name. I actually looked her up. I don't even know if she exists, right? But I just thought it was hilarious.
Did you find her when you looked her up?
No, it's too generic of a name.
Oh, okay.
But
It's like Sally Smith.
yeah, something. Yeah. So I go back to this woman. Of course, what happens? The husband and his buddies beat the crap out of me, and I mean pummel me. So I'm back in this hospital bed again with another
It's quite a
court date.
ride you're on so far.
Yeah. And you know what's on my window this time? Divorce papers from my wife.
Wow.
Okay. Now, my wife and I have a great relationship. But I experienced this divorce paper situation for the first time in my life. I've never been divorced, right? In reality. I'm living this timeline out of somebody actually issuing a divorce setup. And I'm in this bed now. I'm in my head. I'm like, how the heck do I get out of this one?
Right.
How do I think my way through? And I'm trying to think back to a time I could fix this. So I'm like, all right, let me get back to the first court date. So I close my eyes, get there. I can't get back. Instead, I'm a couple years ahead now. Back in this hospital bed. I don't know why this room is kind of like my home base, right? And now there's a letter from my now 16-year-old daughter telling me, please don't come to my prom. Don't come. I don't want to see you.
Wow.
Right? Okay. So I'm going to keep going with this story, with this timeline, because I think this timeline is a fun timeline. So close my eyes again. And now I've just lived through a divorce. I've just lived through my daughter disowning me, right? What can be worse than this? Well, let's fast forward. My wife and I decide to get back together after a few years. Okay. That lasted for about 3 months, because I go back on cheating on her again with the same woman.
Wow.
Okay. I just couldn't stop this timeline from happening.
And apparently this woman was okay with you continuing to come
Yeah,
back.
we had a thing.
Yeah.
It was a thing.
Yeah.
Right? It was a thing. Maybe she wasn't happy with her husband. It was
Right,
just,
right.
we had a thing.
Whatever it was, yeah.
Right. And I closed my eyes again. So I've now cheated. I've been shot. I've divorced.
Beaten up several times.
Beaten up again. Disowned. Got back together. Remarried my wife. Cheat on her again.
With the same woman.
Same woman. Divorced again. Right. Let's fast forward.
Right.
A couple of decades now. Now it's a couple of decades later. I'm in a hospital bed. I'm going to use this. I call this home base, by the way, this
Right,
hospital room.
right.
I'm back in this hospital bed, and taped to the glass wall is an invitation.
Okay.
The invitation is for the 25th anniversary of the woman's ex-husband and his new wife. It's a 25th anniversary invitation to the party. It's a joke. It's a mock.
Sure.
And the back invitation says, "Thank you for everything you've done for letting me find the real love of my life." Right?
Wow.
Right? This has now been 40 years of this timeline at this point. Right? And witnessing and living out these different things of my wife, divorce, this woman, blah, 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 all for nothing. Right? All for nothing. But you know what it was, though? It was the ability to experience, because first of all, listen, we're all a bunch of guys here, right? Every married guy I know thinks they can get any woman if they weren't married, right? The reality of that is, let's be honest, it's not really that simple. But I was allowed to live out that wish if I did.
One of those fantasies, so to speak.
And that's what happens.
Right.
To the point where, fuck, that was
That's all
it was
right.
a great lesson to learn.
And lessons are repeated until they're learned.
Right. Read lessons are repeated until they learn. So,
This
go ahead.
gets at something interesting that I was just talking about yesterday. The whole idea of this ethical non-monogamy stuff, or the polyamory that's very popular these days, I think it's unworkable. And because I don't think humans are designed to share in that way on that level. I mean, your story sort of gets at that. In certain, I mean, it's behind the scenes, obviously, but it's that kind of thing.
Well, first of all, I don't have the budget or the time to have a girlfriend. Let's just be clear. Like, to try to manage two women is already complicated
Yes.
and expensive.
It's impossible.
I have zero desire to try it. The good part about it is now I've done it. Whether people could believe that happened or not,
Right.
I experienced that day to day of what a divorce and losing your children looks like, and remarrying and re-cheating, all that kind of stuff. And I don't have the desire anymore because I know the consequences of it. Not that I didn't know the consequences of it prior.
No, but
you
when
always
you
think,
feel it,
you always think you
it's
can
a
get
whole
away with
different
it, right?
thing.
It's not the same thing.
Right.
But I felt that moment. I watched my kids say goodbye to me, all that kind of stuff. That's really hard stuff to live through. But it was one of those scenarios where, if you saw 5-year-old Alex right now, and 5-year-old Alex is out in the woods, and you guys are and he's out with his friends, and they're hanging out, and there's a fireplace there and all that kind of stuff, and he goes running towards the fire. What do you tell him?
Don't do that.
And what's the first thing he does?
Probably runs in the fire.
Right, because you have to touch it.
Right.
And I believe in my heart that all those lifetimes that I experienced, good, bad, and otherwise, wasn't foretelling any kind of future at all. It was allowing me to touch as many fires as I can. Lessons are learned by hardship and fire.
Yes.
So I have to touch as many of those fires to have more hardships and learn more lessons. Because no matter what people tell us, we're going to touch that fire anyway. Because we have to touch it once, at least once, to know that the fire's hot. It's just built into us to have to figure it out.
Well, it's funny that you talk about hot fire and other stuff like that. So what happened? What's the next step after these?
Sure, these timelines.
Timelines, yes.
Right? Timeline. So back in my home base hospital room, lights are on. My angel friend, I have to call him the nurse that comes in, the young guy that comes in that had told me I was dying, comes back and is like,
Did you feel he was an angel? What did you feel he was?
oh
Let's
yeah,
put
no,
it
he
that
was
way.
first of all, he was a comforting presence.
Okay.
He was the first person that I had a communications with. And I don't know how long I was in that room for. But to have any kind of contact was just great, right? I was like, oh, there's something, someone, some other being here. This is nice. And he was extremely comforting. And I don't know if the word angel is right, but there was an explanation that he gave me. He allowed me to, because, part of his role wasn't just to show me different lifetimes. I was also allowed to learn whatever I wanted to learn from him. And one of my biggest things I wanted to learn was, let's show me heaven. What does heaven look like? He's like, oh, we have time for that. But let me show you kind of what it feels like. Mm. And it was almost as if he just took me and we zoomed out 1 trillion% into the universe, and I could see what the heavens look like.
Huh.
More than one.
More than one. And they were actually in my situation. And let me just preface everything. Everything I'm telling you guys is what I experienced. Right? I have zero idea if this is going to be anybody else's experience or whatever, but it was definitely what I had lived through.
Well, so your background is you're Filipino.
I'm Filipino.
You're Catholic.
I'm Catholic, yes.
You're practicing Catholic?
Practicing Catholic, yes.
Or you were practicing Catholic then?
Like I said, Easter, most Sundays, I guess, holidays, stuff like that. It's a loose conversation.
More typical, so not ardent, although...
Not hearted, I'm not going to confession every week, that kind of stuff. But I had a belief system.
Understood.
So, he walked me through these heavens thing. I'm like, I didn't know there was more than one. I was supposed to know there was more than one. He explained that there were three. Three. And the first heaven was where I was with him. Mm. And that's where he comes from. And they all have roles and jobs. And his job in that first heaven was to guide people like me through death. Mm. And I was very comforted with the idea of multiple heavens, for the sole purpose that it didn't, the goal to get better was still there. You wanted to be up to the next level. You wanted to get to the next heaven, right?
But what does he do? Does he do he goes and does this job and then he goes and puts his feet up at home and has a beer? How does it?
They have lives. It's a continuation of life. It's a continuation of life, which I thought was great.
That's fascinating.
Yeah,
okay.
It's a continuation of life. You have, whether or not he's going home grabbing a beer or, hanging out at Angel Bar, who knows? but there was something, but he was just continuing life. And I call him an angel because he was an angel to me. Mm-hmm. And he was my guide and he helped me through these things. And we had spent years together at this point. And he walks back in the room and goes, got some bad news for you, buddy. Going to hell.
Huh.
But I don't want you to freak out. We all go to hell first. You're going to go there for a couple of days, and then you're going to go to this place called the lobby, and you're going to meet someone called the imager, and he's going to decide if you go forward, where you go, and what level of it. Okay. I says yes, so I'm like, so just a couple of days, right? We're good for a couple of days, right? But same scenario, no fear. I was just told I'm going to hell. I'm not...
You had no reaction whatsoever.
No reaction. I'm not questioning it. I'm not scared of it.
So hell first.
I'm not anxious.
Okay.
Well, no, I'm not sure. Hell first. I feel like that entire time I was in my home base was a version of purgatory, to be honest with you.
Sure.
I felt like that was what people would define as a purgatory state, right? So I'll go to hell first. Okay. Now, like I said, up to this point, in this home base area, there has never been anxiety or fear or worry. You only felt that when I was living those other lifetimes. But in this area, when I'm in this room, this home base room, this kind of mock hospital room, there's no fear, no anxiety at all. So,
one quick question. You mentioned before you were kind of interacting by throwing stuff off shelves when you were witnessing those scenes. Did you feel that the individuals could actually see that? And getting into what I guess you're getting into is, did you actually start feeling desperation or anxiety or anything at that point?
Yeah. So when you're living those, my ghost years, I guess, right? I could best answer that with a quick 30-second story.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
About a year after I woke up, and I'm at home with my wife, middle of the night, a bunch of things fall off the shelf. I'm half awake. My wife is like, "Did you hear that?" I'm like, "Just go back to sleep. That was just me." My exact words. And I'm in that weird half delusional awake stage. Mm-hmm. And she was like, "What the hell does that mean?" I'm like, I just knocked him off. I remember doing this before. She's like, fine. And she goes back to sleep like, what the hell were you talking about? So I had to explain her the story. So maybe they felt it, maybe, but I was in the mode where I was like, I'm not really dead yet. Like, I'm still here.
So before we get into the health thing,
Yeah.
Paulo, did you live a particularly bad life before you got to COVID?
I don't think so.
Did you ever kill anybody?
No.
Did you ever swindle people?
No.
So did you feel like...
Well, was I a saint? No.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Fair.
Yeah.
You were regular, more or less. So do you feel like the hell experience is something everybody goes through?
That was what I was told.
Okay.
That everyone goes through it. To the point where, after I woke up, and we'll go to that story later on, but I researched the crap out of this. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even realize, as a Catholic, that Jesus went to hell first.
He did? He did?
Yeah.
I to be honest, I've probably read the Apostles' Creed and Nicene Creed 1 billion times every Sunday, and it actually says it right there.
It says it right in there.
And I didn't even process it.
He trampled death by death and raised the dead back to the to heaven.
Right. But that was part of the story. And then you research other religions, and Islam has 7 layers of heaven. Right, it's part of their story.
The 7 heavens,
seven heavens, right? And it's not that these things were things I necessarily studied or knew about, but maybe everyone just got it a little bit right, but no one got it completely wrong, right?
Right, you get little different versions or different ideas or facets, so to speak.
And then we give them the human twist and mess it all up, but for the most part.
Well, it becomes a telephone game, right? It's just like I tell you, you tell you.
Right.
By the time it gets to Ming, it's a totally different message, so to speak. But please go on. So what happens?
So I'm told I'm going to go to hell, and see this, and afterwards go see the imager guy at the lobby and all this kind of stuff.
That's after hell is the imager.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So the guy leaves the room. I'm like, okay, when's hell starting? When's hell starting? And I told you this story real fast. I told you this story.
But that's a fascinating one.
So
please go ahead.
In this hospital room I'm in, which I'm just lying in this bed this entire time. Right in front of me are a big glass panel and a glass door. And right next to the glass door is a brass plaque about yay big. Mm-hmm. And it said the entire time was keep the temperature of the room between 68 and 72 degrees Fahrenheit. That's all it said. All it said. For lifetimes, right? Lifetimes. Hell starts, I guess. And I'm just like, what's happening now? And I see this plaque on the wall. And it changed. All it says was, weren't all those Sundays in church a waste? And instantly, all that fear, anxiety, and pain and worry came crashing back to me. And I was like, oh, this is hell. And for some reason, there hasn't been an angel with a devil with a pitchfork and flames or anything. This little stupid brass plaque killed me more than anything else. And I don't know how long it's been, but I look at the plaque again, it changed again. Where's God now? And I'm soaking in what might be coming forward. I mean, the fear is strong now. Nothing has happened to me yet. Nothing has happened, but this ridiculous brass plaque is controlling every emotion I'm having right now, right? And it would keep on changing. Things like, who were you praying to this entire time, right? And oh gosh, one of them was, we'll take good care of your family for you.
Wow.
Right?
So they're just taunting you.
It's just taunting. And I from a faith standpoint, at this point, all faith is gone. Right? You're right. Where is God now? What have I been praying to? That everything that this angel said all those years, that memory is distant at this point. That whole other affair, these other lives, all that is gone. The only reality right now is me and that stupid plaque. Me and that plaque have a relationship, and I hate everything about it, right? And it is demolishing all the spirit and energy I have left. And I didn't think something that simple could literally drop any belief system I ever had.
Yeah.
but it absolutely crushed me. Absolutely crushed me. That was the start of hell.
Was there a thermostat?
There was a thermostat, and I couldn't change it because I couldn't stand up. But if I could, I
So
would
you
have
were
messed it.
bedridden this whole time. There's no way for you to get out of the bed
Aside from when I was living those lifetimes, the whole
Correct,
time in this area, I'm bedridden.
in that.
Yeah,
So
it is.
there's a door, but it doesn't matter because you're not getting to the door.
But I'm not. But at the same time, I'm not trying to either, which is weird. I'm
Not yet, anyway, right?
Yeah, and I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to escape. I'm not trying to. I'm just kind of like, I'm waiting for nothing, but also not impatiently waiting for something. I'm kind of just
Oh, well
there.
said. Well said.
You just accepted it.
Right, which is really hard because, I've told people that component of the story multiple times, and they're like, you could meditate. No, but eventually you have to go to the bathroom, and eventually you're going to pass out from not eating anything. And if there's an eventuality in life that we can't get back to until we get to that point, right? Because there are these moments that you can't get to pure not waiting or not anxious, because we're always
You're always doing this or this, right? There's no this.
it's impossible. Maybe you can have it for a second,
Yeah.
but eventually that second is going to end, and then you're anxious about that time ending, right? Or I have to get back to work, or whatever. There's always something that's going to happen that's going to force anticipation or impatience. There, it never existed, right? Until hell. Hell, all of that impatience and waiting and time comes crashing back to you, and then the tortures began.
Okay.
There were two.
Buckle up, folks.
Yeah, this gets rough. There were two, I'll call them, demon people assigned to me.
Okay.
Right.
Assigned to you, which is so impersonal and crazy when you think about it.
And can you describe what these individuals looked like, the demons?
Yeah, one was I'll say like a middle-aged Caucasian dude, bigger guy, say like 6'1" ish, 6'2" ish, probably north of 250 pounds, right? Had a goatee, brownish hair, and the other woman was about 40, 45 years old, beautiful eyes, gorgeous eyes, brunette. Very, very pretty face, but she was just the worst. She was just the worst.
Just the worst.
Just the worst. Now, the male guy, the male one,
Both Caucasian, you said?
both Caucasians, but I think the woman had a little bit of like a more of a, I guess, Mediterranean, olive-skinned kind of feel to her. Gorgeous, absolutely stunning. I loved her eyes. Her eyes were great until she became terrible. Right. But the guy had more traditional tortures. So we'll go down a very dark path here. There was this story where when he was first walked into the room, I could feel something was going to happen. So I start screaming, but nothing comes out of my mouth. Right? He takes me and flips me over and basically has his way with me. And I'm screaming and nothing is happening. And my face is pushed hard against this cold metal bed. And while it's happening, I'm just there. And he's like just having fun. Right? Okay, so he just walks out afterwards. And I'm there like just in a curled up mess of like, what? What just happened? And as he's walking out of the room, he's just like, well, it's hell. Didn't you think this was going to happen? And I'm just like, I guess I should have anticipated this, right? I guess. So anyway, that happens. And then I'm back and I'm like in this weird, like, just like desperation, curled up ball in the bed. And I see this woman's eyes like peeking through the side door. It was the nurse, the other demon woman nurse, whatever you want to call her. And next thing I know, she would make things appear in my arms and in my hands, which was really torturous. And it's not what you think. The first thing that appeared to me was my son's baby blanket. And the next thing I know was like my daughter's like stuffed animals. And it didn't make me happy to have those things. It made me sad that I couldn't have them. And if you think about it, the whole time I've been telling you these stories, I didn't even mention missing my children because there was none of that feeling, right? This was like, oh my gosh, I don't have my kids anymore, right? So this cycle would happen for a very long time. And then the worst tortures started happening. And at some point, you could only get assaulted so many times. It's like, I'm going to punch you at 3 o'clock every Thursday. It's more like, all right, punch me, let's get over with it, on with the day. Same thing would happen with everything else physical, right? But then the tortures got worse. And I had told you a story where, because you're back in hell, time is now in existence again. So, dark path here, right? I am going to assault and kill your wife in 3 weeks. As a husband, and a father, give me a gun or give me a plane ticket. Let's get us out of here. I'm going to protect you, right? You have zero ability to do anything. You're in a different area of existence at this point. You know what was worse than them showing me that happening? The 3 weeks sitting there and knowing you couldn't do anything.
Waiting.
You just sit there by yourself. And by the way, in that time frame, they didn't even bother touching me. They didn't even bother talking. They just left me alone. They left me alone for weeks and months and years and torture you over and over again. And the only torture was your brain knowing, or not your brain, but your consciousness knowing you have zero ability to do anything about it. Wow. And you sit there and you wait and you almost wait and want it to come faster. Imagine wanting something bad to happen to your wife and kids faster, just so you can get past the pain of waiting, right? And hell was very good at figuring this stuff out. Like they knew every point of torture that they can get to you. So anyway, so that would happen for 30, 40, 50 years at this point. And then the lowest point of hell came. My very lowest point of hell came. And I'm happy I hit it because I needed the turning point. So a couple decades in, and I am getting raped again by this guy. But different this time. Somebody walks in the room and I'm just there. It's happening. And this other person just walking around the room as if I don't matter or exist. And it's just happening. And he's like, okay, hey, keep going. I'm just going to be over here. No one's stopping him. No one's doing anything. And then at that point, I just acknowledged just how much I can't do. And that, okay, I'm giving
how little you matter.
How little you matter.
At that time.
How little you matter. And it was more just, okay, this is my life. This is my existence. This is it.
Yeah. So at any point when you were going through all these terrible things, obviously, in this torture, were you able to say, hey, God, where are you? Are you helping me here?
Good timing.
Or anything else?
Perfect timing. So this was, like I said, this was my lowest point. I remember this. I remember this moment so significantly because I think at every other time, and there's a thousand other stories I could tell about it, I always felt like I had a chance to fight back, or I could try to do something to lessen the pain.
You had some control. You could close your eyes and reposition or whatever.
Something I could do to kind of just shut it out. Mm-hmm. But at this moment, when this happened, all of that ability or wishing or wanting was just, this is it. You just gave up. So I'm back in this home base. And I'm at my lowest point. I remember just being there like, okay, let's just get to tomorrow. Not even get through today. Let's just get to tomorrow so we could do it again for tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next eternity. That was it. And then I heard God speak to me for the very first time. And when I tell this, the first time I said this story to somebody, she leaned into me and she's like, was it the thunderous voice of God? And I'm like, I don't know what that meant, but
was it Morgan Freeman?
Yes, yeah. But it was actually the slightest voice in a whisper, and it was just simply, it says, Paulo, I'm still here. That was it. And as crazy as it sounds, that little whisper that could have been imaginary, that could have been whatever else, was like everything to me. Everything. to the point where it gave me the strength to like, okay, let's go, let's do this, let's fight. Like there's a way out. If you're there and you exist, that means there's another life and reality than this. And I think that's what really clicked in my head. I'm like, okay, so this isn't eternity. If somebody else is talking to me from somewhere else, then I don't have to. There's a somewhere else.
Right.
There's a someone else. Okay, so maybe God does still exist, despite what the stupid plaque told me, right? Right? 40 years later, right? Okay.
Don't believe the plaque.
Don't believe the plaque. Don't believe the plaque, right? So the story goes where I'm in the bed. I'm like, oh, what the hell? So God, is that you? And it just made sense. Everything just made sense right at that moment. Like, okay, there's a different existence. There's a different level somewhere. Go back. And the story of, okay, God, I had this angel guy talking to me. Oh, there are multiple heavens. I'm not supposed to be here permanently. Everything came flooding back. Like, oh my gosh, there's still a life out there. And it gave me enough ammo or energy to fight back, right? And when I say fight back, it wasn't in the physical, though I tried and it was stupid. But
why was it stupid?
well, because the physical was even the whole concept of me getting raped didn't make sense.
Did you try to punch the demon?
I've tried. I tried. I tried to stab him. I've tried to, I tried to get out of the bed and I tried to electrocute him with the lamppost at some point.
How'd that go?
Oh no, it was you can't kill something, right? You can't. But even then, even like the physical pain of getting didn't make sense. I'm dead. Like, how does this relate? And that's what they didn't like.
What?
They didn't like that I could figure out that it wasn't a reality that I had to live in. That whatever they were presenting to create for me, that my reality had to be this life in this room to get destroyed every day and watch my kids die. I didn't have to accept it. And every time I chose to not accept it, they would come up with a worse torture. But they were always just trying to come up with a way to convince me of a new reality, right? Now, when I say I would win once in a while, I'm talking about like 99.9% I would lose, right? But then 0.01% I would have a little victory, and I could hear what I would say the demons actually screaming, which is a terrible, terrible sound, in agony that I could figure out and break their cycle of torture. And then they would come up with something worse and worse and worse. But
now, was the mechanism, just so I understand, was the mechanism that's what you should be doing? Is that the lesson that you had to figure your way out of this? That it wasn't real? That it wasn't? Don't accept the reality, in other words?
Yeah. So if
or was a way through radically accept, like metanoia, like we were talking about, where it's the other way? So I'm just curious.
I just think I was always taught in church studies or Bibles or even stories and movies and crap that everything is eternal, right? Like if you die, you go to heaven or hell and you're there for eternity, right? I think the realization I had in hell was that it doesn't have to be eternity. Like there is a path out. Even in your darkest hell, there was still a voice calling you to get out, right? You didn't have to accept forever, even in death, right? Which leads to the other stories, right? Okay, there's multiple heavens. Who says I can't go from level 1 to level 2 to level 3?
Sure.
Right? Or why can't, if that's the case, why can't I go from hell, purgatory to heaven and back? Right? But to the point where if I could figure out a way to leave that reality and to believe that that didn't have to be my eternity, I could kind of work my way out of hell. Because at some point they're going to run out. I would hope so, right?
Well, why would they? I mean, eternity is still eternity.
You would think so.
So the interesting part is hell is eternity, and you say you're there for eternity. I don't think they're lying because there's no time. So when there's no time, yeah, you're there for eternity. But that doesn't mean that eternity doesn't end.
Right.
Right? You can leave eternity,
right,
and it'll continue being eternity. You just won't be there.
Right.
Right. That's interesting.
In a different reality, and keeping your faith seems to help you progress out of that.
Yeah, that's funny because people always ask me, well, you're a Catholic, so you're a Christian, right? You had faith. I'm not. I'm like, dude, I have no idea. All I know is that whatever I believed in was enough to get me out of hell. If you're going to be a Wiccan and believe in a tree, you better believe the hell out of that tree is going to get you out of hell, right? No, I'm serious. Like
No. And that's no dig on Wiccans.
No, not at all.
I mean, God bless them.
Nor do I mock Muslims or anybody else.
Right.
But if you're going to believe in your faith, right, it better be enough faith. All I know is that my faith, which was there, then destroyed and came back, right, was enough to get me out, right? Not that I had very good faith, because I told you I had lost all of it at one point. But it was enough to get me out. 99.9% of losing became a little bit more of me winning more and more. And at some point, I was back in this room, and it didn't feel the same. It didn't feel the same.
And this was after you heard the voice of God?
After I heard the voice, after the same. Now, it was still, oh man, I haven't told the story before. Not this way. It was dark, a nighttime kind of feel. I did have like this weird small window in the back of my room, which I can kind of feel night and day, right? Which is really torturously annoying, by the way, because you knew the days would pass in hell. As stupid as that sounds, right? Having sunlight and nighttime gave you time concepts.
Sure.
Which was really freaking irritating.
Yeah.
Right? But it was nighttime. And for the first time, I tried to get out of bed and peek backwards. Right? In the distance, I saw the light. It was just not like a tunnel of light like other people have experienced. Mine was, I use the best example I can think of is 9/11. During 9/11, every year now, they light up the Twin Towers with these two spotlights. Imagine that 1,000 times brighter, but 1,000 times further away. And everything around it has this blackish feel with a little bit of purples and blues and greens mixed into the sky. But it's pretty much dark. But you could see shadows of bodies and things, bikes, cars, all heading in that direction towards this light. And
This is hell?
no, this is me looking out the window of hell, right? Seeing this light.
Okay,
there's a window behind me, and I'm peeking outside, and I can see this. I'm like, that's been there this entire time, right? But it's the first time I'm looking at this thing. So I'm seeing it. And as I'm looking at it, I can see bodies, like say cars, bikes, people, just, dogs, whatever, walking towards that direction. And it's the lobby that I'm supposed to be going to, and the imager is there somewhere. I'm supposed to be heading there, right? So, the feeling of the room has changed. I look outside the glass doors. There's another person there I've never seen before. He comes in the room. Bigger guy, like he has like he looks Filipino, more Spanish looking, shaved head.
Bigger than the goatee guy?
A little bit bigger, a little more muscular looking, right?
Oh,
a little more muscular guy. Wearing a doctor's jacket. And remember, this whole scene is always related to a hospital room, right? He goes, "Hey, I'm David DeSantos." I'm like, "That's my last name. Not DeSantos, but Santos." He goes, "Oh, yeah." It's like, "Well, your grandfather wants to take you upstairs." My grandfather. And he's talking about my father's father, who died when my dad was 14 or 15 years old.
So you never met him?
Never met him.
Yeah.
See, grandfather's waiting for us. Now my grandfather, my dad's dad was a doctor in the Philippines, right? He goes, "Yeah, it's a pretty big guy here. He got a room ready for you upstairs. Do you want to go?" And I'm just like, I think so. And why would I want to stay here for, right? But I'm still a little bit kind of confused. Like, I think he usually goes, "Yeah, give me some time. Give me a couple hours. We'll get it ready for you. We'll get it ready for you." And I'm like, okay. And then oh man, I haven't told the story in a bit also. So, and then I'm back in the hospital bed, and the guy leaves, and another doctor walks in. And I'm like, so this guy just came in and he told me that I could leave. My grandfather's waiting for me upstairs. I think I should go. He's like, you don't know what you've just been through. Just stay here. Just stay. Like, we'll take care of you here. Now, this isn't that hell feeling for some reason. Like, I feel kind of okay now. I'm like, oh, you'll take care of me here? He's like, well, I guess, and I'm like, well, I guess I'm already here. Like, why make the big move?
Why bother?
Why
Right,
change?
right,
Like,
right.
it's comfort in what you know, I guess, right?
Yes.
Right? There's a little bit of comfort in what you know. I'm like, well, over there sounds like it's a new world and a new whole thing I got to experience and moving somewhere. I'm not even sure why my grandfather's here. Like, I haven't seen him ever. And you're here and you're kind of like, just stay. We'll take care of you. We got you. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, so the guy comes, so maybe he's like, so you want to stay here? I'm like, I guess so. So an hour later, this other guy comes back, the Santos guy. And I'm like, I think I'm just going to stay. And he's like, I thought you were going to come upstairs. Like, your grandfather's waiting for you. I'm like, well, this other guy just told me I should stay here. And I'm just like pointing, I'm like, well, I don't know, everybody wants me somewhere, right? The other doctor walks in while he's in, and they both step outside, and they're fighting, like arguing and yelling.
Interesting.
Like, no, he's staying here. No, he needs to go. He needs to go now. They're waiting for him. He needs to be up there. He's like, no, he's not done. He has to be here. They need him here. Wow. Right? We got him here. And I'm watching them like, no, not physical fight, but like they're having like a real freaking argument about where I'm supposed to go. But his grandfather, who is a big shot of some sort here, is telling me to take him upstairs now. They're ready for him. And he's like, I don't care. He'll go there when he's ready. He needs to be here right now. And he wants to stay here. And that was kind of like this weird like turning point of, okay, this isn't quite hell anymore. I'm not sure how I got out, by the way. All I know is that the scene changed and I'm suddenly in this weird
Was the plaque
fight.
still there?
The plaque was still there. It did not say anything strange. It was just back to the 72 degrees. But they're in this argumentative stage over me. And I have no idea, honestly, what's happening. I don't know what upstairs really looks like. I have no idea why this got. I just felt comfortable staying where I was.
So just to recap,
Yeah.
You heard God's voice,
Yeah.
which you thought was God's voice, which I think we can all agree is probably the case. At that point, the feeling immediately began to change?
No. There was other tortures that would change.
Other tortures.
But I will say the rape stopped because it wasn't enough, right?
Because it wasn't enough.
It wasn't enough because I knew it didn't matter.
Right.
What like I'm dead. What am I feeling? What is this pain? What is like I'm past it. It's nothing. This you can do this all day long. It's not gonna make me forget that there's another voice talking to me. So what are you gonna do next? And they'd find another way, and I'd lose faith again, and go through this cycle endlessly, right? Until eventually, I wake up. And
You started winning.
I started winning
so
a
to speak.
bit more.
A bit more.
Not a lot more, but a bit more. A
then
little
the
victory
scene
changed.
changed.
And the
Right.
scene changed.
Okay, so back to the two doctors fighting, and then what?
They both leave as they're arguing, and they're like, I see one of them, and they both kind of just walk separate ways in the hallway, right? A nurse walks in, and this is weird. I think it's really freaking hilarious. She gives me an iPad,
On iPad,
Yeah.
okay.
and I FaceTime my wife, who is 82 years old, just passed away, and she's at heaven level number 2. Beats me, right? Heaven level
All
number
good
2.
nurses go to heaven, too.
Oh, good. Let's go. Heaven level 2. So she's past 1. She's done working for her life at least, right? Heaven level 2. And she's like, oh my God, I've been trying to get you forever. I'm like, okay. like, oh my God, it's you. Like I had already mourned your death multiple times. I had already mourned my children getting killed and stabbed and all sorts of terrible things happening. I have kind of gotten past all of that just to realize that you're still around, right? And she's like, and she gave me this really kind of businessy scientific explanation about like, it's not easy to just bring you out. Like, we have to work you out of there.
Just to work you out.
Work you out of there, like get you out, but there's a process. It's not like, and I'm thinking like, well, there's like some contracts and paperwork I got to sign. Like, what do you got to do here?
Immigration papers?
Yeah, what do I do? I got lined up like in the DMV, but no, but it was just, but there was a thing. There was some way to get out, and I didn't really bother asking. I just kind of said, okay, so what's next? let's just say that what happens next is the simplest form, and this is what I guess why heaven I could say is going to sound really boring to a lot of people. Right? So let me go back to the hell explanation first. So when I talk about that waiting for bad things to happen in hell, I always explain it as, if I could explain hell in one sentence, hell is imagine a place where all of the worst things are happening to everyone you love, and you can't do anything about it. Simultaneously, all of the best things are happening, and you can't be there for it. Okay? Because those are as torturous as the bad things, right? And you can't be there for it. Heaven, conversely, is simply imagine a world where you don't worry about anything good or bad ever happening. So you no longer have want or will or need to go to the bathroom or existence, just not there, right? When I got to what I'm going to call heaven, and I'm not even sure how or what happened of why I was there all of a sudden, but you were just there. You were just in existence. There was nobody there but my wife. And you could just feel the presence of God everywhere else, right? So I'm going to ask you a quick question.
What did
right?
the presence of God feel like?
I'll get to that in one sec, yeah.
Okay, sure.
Ask you a quick question. Can you name 5 people you want in your heaven?
5?
Just 5. 5 people you want in your heaven. 5 of them.
Yes.
You got them in your head. Okay. Would all
Obviously, I'm there.
right.
Clearly.
Right. Would all 5 people say you and the other 4 people you said? Or would they have their own 5 people?
I would imagine they might have other people.
Right. And those people would have other people as well, And eventually you have people that you don't want in your heaven, right? Okay. So it couldn't actually be heaven. Why would you have people you don't want in your heaven?
True.
Right. In my scenario, my only person in my heaven was my wife. Because in my world, my kids had already grown up. They had their own children. They had their own spouses. They had their own heavens. Knowing that I no longer need to see them anymore, I was happy that they had their own worlds and their own endings. Right? I chose to have kids, but I never chose my kids. My kids certainly didn't choose me. Right? I was their father. They have no choice about that fact, right? My wife was the only person that I chose, and she was actually the only one in the world that chose me back.
That's interesting. Some people think that you do choose your parents and who you end up being born to before you come into this life, so to speak. Like I want to have that experience with those parents. I know that that's what they're going to do, and that's the ride I want to go on.
Right. But I didn't choose but the parents didn't choose the kids.
No.
Right.
Right.
Right. So because of that whole weird dynamic of choosing and wanting and everything else, there's very few people that you've chosen and have chosen you back in your life. Very, very, very few. And for me, it was just one. Right. And the reason I bring this up because, that sounds really freaking boring, right? There's no cool mini golf or go-karts or some paintball field somewhere we can hang out at, some basketball.
Excuse me, I'm going to put through.
Yeah, there's nothing going on, right? There's nothing going on. But what's funny was it makes a crap ton of sense that there's not a lot of that stuff happening or any of that stuff happening. Because all of that stuff has an ending. All of that stuff is a high temporarily. And then what happens to a high? It has to come back down. Right? Heaven doesn't have highs or lows. It's all just medium. Because if highs were consistent, it would still be the new medium. But it's just medium.
So heaven is Prozac.
If you want to call it that, yeah. But heaven is that experience of just being there. Of just being present. You're no longer wanting. You're no longer wishing. You're no longer thinking about other people. You're no longer hoping. You're no longer seeing anything you don't want to see, don't need to say. You know everything you need to know, but at the same time, you don't really care because what's that knowledge going to do for you?
No, is that applicable on all 3 levels?
It wasn't applicable in level 1 or 2, but 3, it was, you're good, you're gold. 3, you've made it. Level 3, you're like, oh man, this is it. But then it's basically just a very medium place. And I say that in the best way possible, because you don't want to have a high. A high will imply a low at some point, right? Highs have peaks and valleys. Everything is just great all the time, or just medium, because great is the new medium. Medium's the new great. And then I said the presence of God. And the presence of God isn't, like I said, you know it's there. You don't believe it's there. You don't think it's there.
No,
you don't want. You just know it's there,
Right.
And it's comforting. It's just the best comfort you could have, because you know you're taken care of.
So you never actually met with the imager then?
So yeah, that's what people ask me. Did I end up going to the lobby? So the part of hell that I didn't really get into, because this whole part of the 20-hour story, was where
Well,
I was supposed to go to the imager. I was supposed to leave hell. The devil tricked me. One of those demons tricked me and forced me back into hell. At least I think they tricked me, but either way, I'm stuck back in hell for a few more decades. But I remember almost getting my foot out the door almost, and being pulled back in. And in one of the scenarios where God spoke to me in hell, another scenario, years later, he did say, like, okay, it's like, oh no, you're going, let's go. Like, we're just gonna skip the question, skip the Q&A, and I just get you going. And when I got into heaven, there was no question or concern about, oh my God, first of all, why was I in hell? You don't really question that stuff anymore. It's all behind you now.
So how did it go? Did they literally walk you out of that room, or how did it?
From what?
Or did it just dissipate and reappeared and you were someplace else?
Dissipate, reappear somewhere else. Like the ability, the reasoning of physicalness, of physical.
Yeah, physicality, you're not going to have.
It doesn't exist in that same way.
But I was just wondering if there was any interaction that said, like, you're going, because you just said God said you're going now. So.
Oh, no. So there are moments where I've spoken with God.
So you spoke to God multiple times, is what you're stating.
Yeah, multiple times. Now, sometimes it was through, I'll just talk in my head and you hear me, we have a conversation. Sometimes he'd manifest and we would have sit-downs.
What did he look like?
He was a very Jesus-y figure. Jesus-y figure, not quite exactly the same way, but you felt it, right?
Did he look Caucasian,
Middle Eastern,
more Middle Eastern-ish? But like I said, I'm not sure if that's the image he had to be. I think he was the image I needed him to be.
Okay.
You know what I mean? To be comforted and to be relaxed. I think heaven is just so personal, and hell is just so personal. If I told you, are you scared of snakes?
No.
You're not scared of snakes? You love snakes? But you're not scared of them?
I don't care.
Yeah, so why would they torture you with snakes in hell?
Right.
Meanwhile, I'm probably just like swarming and covered in them because I freaking hate snakes. Right?
Were you in some of those instances?
Oh, there were. Yeah, there were. They know what you love and hate.
So they go after your deepest fears and such.
Well, think about it, right? My kids were tortured in front of me. Why would my kids be tortured in front of you?
Right.
Right. It's going to be a very personal situation. One of the lessons I've learned from all this.
Very customizable.
It's very customizable. Yeah, it's like
It's a bespoke boss press.
Yeah,
You pay more for the extra deluxe package, kind of thing.
Choose your own adventure situation.
Right, right.
It's pretty wild.
They give you some towels.
Yeah.
It's like
Monogrammed. Very nice. This is Alex itself.
Yeah. Yeah, but one of the things I always loved about it was, in when I tell back the story of heaven and hell and everything else, was, by learning to love more things in life, you're basically giving them more ammo to destroy you in hell. Right? But at the same time, those things are what keeps you going. Those loves, those beliefs, those systems of faith and understanding and wishing and wanting, as much as it's torturous, and they're going to use it against you, every single one of those things, you need it to get out.
Okay, so you went through hell, you got out.
Yeah.
You got to heaven. You got to second heaven, you got to third heaven.
I got all the way to the top, baby.
All the way to the top.
Eventually.
Top floor.
Eventually.
Penthouse suite.
Yeah.
Okay.
How are the towels?
Yes, beautiful.
Yeah.
Plush.
Monogram too.
Monogram, very nice. Turkish cotton.
Yeah.
So you're there, and then what?
I don't know how long I was there for. And then one moment later, I am awake in a hospital room. I am confused. A nurse and doctor are yelling at me in my face, screaming at me, and saying, Mr. Santos, can you hear me? Can you see me? Can you see me? Are you here? Are you here? And I'm like, I'm still dead. And they're like, no, you're very much alive. You are very much alive. And the next thing I know, and I do not know how much of this actually happened because I was just woken up. I'm sure there's 1,000 different drugs in me at this point. I rip off my gown. I rip off the tubes on my body, and I beat the crap out of the nurse. I jump out of bed. This is weeks later after going down. I jump out of bed butt naked, and I'm pummeling a male nurse. His name is Sam. I'm sorry, Sam, if you're listening to this. I apologize ahead of time.
Have you spoken to him since?
I have not spoken to him. I've spoken to the doctors and stuff since. Now, you gotta remember, I've lost 50 pounds at this point, 40 pounds or so. I'm incapable of walking.
So you're not really pummeling him very hard.
I don't know.
But for all you're worth, basically.
They were shocked that I even stood up.
Right.
They said they've never seen anyone with such a massive adrenaline rush. And I remember my only fear was that I was back in hell. Like, oh my God, I am back in hell. And they stabbed me in the thigh with a needle and out. Wake up a couple hours later and I'm handcuffed. Not handcuffed. I'm
Restrained.
I'm restrained on the bed. In my awesome brain power at this point, I escaped the restraints.
Oh, Houdini.
And come up with this massive plan to murder the nurse.
Right? You got something against this guy.
No, this was a female nurse this time, just to kill.
Female.
So in my head, what's going on in my head right now is, okay, I'm back in hell, right? I need to cycle back through death somehow and get back to heaven. So if I go back, if I kill somebody, kill myself afterwards, get back to hell, go through the cycle, get back to heaven eventually. What's eternity again? I could do another 5,000 years. It's fine. It's all the same thing, right? Just go through the cycle. I need to get back to where I just was because right now I'm in hell, right? So I literally come up with this plan. So I took the little call phone thing attached to the bed. And for some reason, I'm just like, I can escape these freaking Velcro restraints. Sorry guys, sorry.
Don't worry.
I escaped these Velcro restraints. So I take the little call thing and I'm tossing it around the side of the bed, missing it. What I'm trying to do is get it wrapped around the other side of the bed. Now these things have these big handles on the side of the bed.
Right, sure.
So I literally get it there, and eventually I got it to hook on, and I'm able to get it under. Oh, good, perfect watch. I'm gonna try to get under the Velcro restraints.
Right.
And I got out of it.
Oh.
Right. So in my head, it was like a 2-month plan. I heard it was probably like an hour or two. Right.
I'm surprised they left you alone that long.
Well, yeah. So they didn't realize I was capable of this stuff because usually when you're extubated and the tube is moved, you're just basically done. You're flat.
Meanwhile, you're like full on MacGyver mode.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it got bad. It got bad. So my first attempt was, okay, I'm gonna kill myself right now. And if I
because they gotta get it back.
If I die in hell, like I'm still in hell in my head. If I die in hell, do I just like I'm not sure. I'm
just ascend to
figuring
heaven.
something,
Yeah.
right? So on my body, I have a tube coming into my neck, which is a central line that goes right into my heart. There's another tube in my thigh. I have no idea, but I heard that also goes into your heart somehow.
Yeah,
and
femoral artery.
Yeah, and there's like 45 other tubes attached to my body. I start ripping them off.
Nice.
When you rip off this one, it's a lot of fun. It's like a fountain of blood.
Oh, it's a spurt
with
goes out.
with every beat of the heart, it's and I see this woman nurse at the door, and
Right.
she's a larger woman, and she's like on the window. She's like, "Don't you do it! Don't stop right now!" I'm like, "Ew! I'm gonna do it anyway. I don't believe in you, demon." And I'm all messed up. So I'm like, and I'll rip it out. And I rip out the one in my thigh, and the blood just starts gushing. And white sheets at a hospital, I'm in a pool of blood, right? And I'm like, I'm just gonna bleed out right now. And I'm looking at her, I'm like, yeah, this is happening. This is happening. So she calls for the doctor, and this is the time of COVID, right? You can't just run into a COVID patient's room.
Sure.
And so I see her, she's gowning up. The doctor's like, just wait. He'll weaken a little bit. And she comes running in after about 2 minutes of me like getting delirious from the amount of blood I'm losing, and she slams her elbow into my chest.
She throws you the people's elbow.
Yeah. She goes full all-out rock on me, and she drops it down, boom, and she puts all of her weight. And she's a bigger woman, and she put all of her weight on my chest, and I'm like, bleh, and put me down again. All right, so they restrain. I wake up again.
Right.
I'm cleaned up in a new set of restraints. Now I'm at a full chest restraint. They restrained the crap out of me.
They're not messing around anymore with you.
Yeah. I escape again.
No.
I escape again.
How do you do it?
A similar scenario. So this one had a large buckle on the chest, but I did the same thing with the first one, which I don't know why they didn't stop it the first time, but they must not have seen it. But this time they also have a 24/7 person watching me.
Okay.
So I'm escaping, and she's seeing me doing it. I'm gonna kind of sneak this. I'm like, just kind of do a little side escape.
Nothing to see here.
And got it. So I escape. This time, in my infinite genius, I decide I'm gonna kill this nurse if she tries to come save me again. Right? I get the call thing, and I'm unscrewing it with my thumb. Now it's been weeks, so my thumbnails are long enough.
Oh yeah.
And I'm unscrewing it. My goal is to electrocute this nurse with this call bell with about 3 volts. This is my goal in life right now. So I'm literally stripping it. I rip out the wires, the cables. I'm stripping the red and the green cable. I'm like, okay, I can do this. And my goal is to electrocute this nurse. 3 volts. Oh, and yeah, so obviously that didn't end too well. Did nothing. But yeah, that was
I got you.
Yeah. So they stabbed me again, put me down again, and that was it. But that was it. But and, it's funny. That must have happened for a good 24 hours of me like in and out of like consciousness. I'd wake up, I'd do something stupid like that. They put me down. I'd wake up again, and I was still in ICU at that time. Right. Now this is about 24 hours of just having been extubated. So April 6th, they pulled the tube out. April 7th is the first time I remember being awake, right? That happened to be my birthday, right? And they finally got a phone to me. And I called my wife. I heard her voice for about 1.5 milliseconds, and all of reality came flooding back. I calmed down. I'm like, oh, hey guys, what's going on? And they were like, what the hell just happened? I don't know. I just needed to hear some sort of grounding reality. And everything came flooding back. I remembered everything that happened. I remember where I was. Now, also remember, I went down to Center State Hospital. I woke up at Jersey Shore Medical in Neptune, about 20 miles away.
Okay.
Right? So I don't even know how I got to another hospital.
Right. Like, when did they move you?
Right.
Did they tell you?
No, I was in a coma.
No, I meant, like, did they tell you later? Like,
Oh, yeah, I found out all the stuff later on. But for the meantime, I'm like, I was just in a different world, different universe, different existence. And I'm also at a different hospital when I wake up. Like, I'm very confused.
Very confused.
But for some reason, the minute I heard my wife, everything is kind of like calm. It's like, okay, let's talk. Tell me what happened, guys. Let's kind of get through this. And they were like, who the hell are you? So it was funny. My wife was home when I woke up. She was home. They called me. She didn't even know I got extubated. But they said, hey, quick question for you. How was your husband before he went down?
Oh, totally nuts. Yeah.
Now, remember, none of them knew me from the first hospital, so they didn't know how I was before.
Sure.
They just thought I was some psychopath trying to murder people. But yeah, that was one of those fun stories where I was like, man, I was really a terrible, terrible patient.
Did they put you through a bunch of psych testing afterwards?
Oh, yeah. So immediately afterwards,
naturally.
so I was in suicide watch for the first day, first 2 days after waking up. 24/7 coverage they're supposed to have somebody in the room with you, but they're not allowed to during COVID. So they had this like little old lady at like a glass window panel, and she was like, every time I would turn away from her, she would tap her pants like, nope, you gotta be facing me the entire time. They put up cameras in my room, like baby monitors, so they could see me all the time. They just didn't trust me. To be fair, I wouldn't trust me either.
Yeah, seriously.
Right?
I'll murder you.
Yeah.
Come in here.
Yeah, come on in. Let's go.
Here's those 3 volts.
Yeah. Hey, it was a good idea in my head. In my head, 3 volts was good enough. But Yeah, no. So after that, psychiatrist came in about 24 hours later, and he's like, "So, quick question: you had said some pretty crazy stuff, yesterday, and you tried a couple things to do. Like, are you okay? Like, what's going on through your head?" I'm like, "Doctor, I thought I was in hell. I'm so sorry." And he was like, "Okay." And he was, but I was just convicted. Like I was said, I thought I was in hell. Mm-hmm. I wasn't questioning it at all. I was like, I just thought I was in hell. And to be fair, remember that first hospital room when I first died. Sure. There was a whiteboard there all the time. I told you guys. Mm-hmm. I always said the nurse's name or the date in the hospital. And when I woke up, it was April 6th when they extubated. April 7th was the day I remember first being conscious, and I couldn't talk. I had not used my throat. I had a tube down my throat for weeks.
Wait, did you say April 6th is your birthday?
April 7th is my birthday. April 6th is when I woke up.
That's my sister's birthday, April 6th. Anyway.
Yeah, so April 7th is when I woke up. And I remember asking the first person I could what day it was. And she's like, "Oh, it's April 7th. Happy birthday." I'm like, April 7th? And I could barely talk, so I'm not even sure exactly how I'm saying this. But all I heard her say was something about 2077.
2077?
Yeah, 2077. I'm like, what? I've been gone for 50 years? Are you kidding me? And I freaked out at the idea that I've been gone for 57 years.
Sure.
Right? Like, I've been in a coma for 57 years? Like, this is some sort of lifetime
life is
movie.
over,
yeah.
When did they pull the plug?
Yeah. Like, why would you keep me alive this long for? And I'm not sure how much of this I'm actually saying, but in my brain, I was just so pissed and so angry. Well, I'm going to kill this person. What are you, been dead for 57 years. Like, what the hell's going on here?
There's another one on the list.
It's like, Mr. Santos, we found a list of people you wrote down in your journal. It says nurse A, nurse B. Yeah. But,
and then kill self.
In that order.
And the first angel or whatever shows up, he's just like, just shaking his head. Yeah. Didn't we teach you anything?
What have you not learned yet? Yeah.
So you got back to that. But let's talk about, so that sounds like the whole ride.
Yeah.
But we know there's more because your personal current business is based off of some things that you learned while you were over there. And so when did that all happen?
So it was in my ghost years. Like I said, you could live lifetimes where you were around or not around. And for some stupid reason, I spent 3 years working. Of course. Right?
No wonder you're sick of it.
Yeah. Maybe it was hell. I don't know.
Well, I was going to say, you were in hell.
Who knows? But I spent 3 years working, and I spent 3 years designing this system. I don't know why or what or how it happened. I just did it. Thank God I did it, I guess, right? But I spent years doing it, and for some reason, when I woke up, everything made sense. There was no fear of jumping ship and leaving a new company, leaving an old company, or starting something new, because in my head, I'd already done it. I had already done it. Now, I'll tell you a quick timeline. One of those other timelines that I lived through, I was much, much older. And there was kind of a slogan my company had that I just made, right? And the company slogan wasn't, "Didn't you wish you did this 5 years ago?" And it was like a slogan I would be telling myself. And then it would fast forward to "Didn't you wish you did this 50 years ago?" And once Tom said, "Imagine you did this 75 years ago. Where would we be today instead of you doing this just now?" Right? And it was kind of a personal slogan, company slogan thing that I would always tell my employees in the distant future. And I kind of lived a lot. It made so much sense when I woke up. Why was I waiting to do all these things for an eventuality that might never come? And how much better would I have just been if I have just done it today or 5 years ago or 75 years ago? Where would I have actually taken life, or in that sense, a business or a company or whatever else I was doing, if I had just started sooner? Right? And that to me gave me so much clarity in how the business and life and everything else works.
Yeah. Wow. So what was so you spent all that time working. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. Aren't you guys all looking forward to dying now?
So where was the, what did heaven look like?
Nothing and everything. It was, for me, it was emptiness. In the best way possible.
You and your wife were walking around in a sort of a cloudy void kind of thing?
Really walking around. I remember my first feeling of heaven. I remember in hell trying to imagine heaven. As we do now. We try to imagine hell, and even I tell you a story, you guys try to visualize hell and heaven for what it might be, and you're not going to get it right because it was my hell and my heaven. You're gonna have your own images, right?
Yeah.
In my I remember being in hell, and I remember feeling grass in my hands, tall grass, and I was just kind of like
the Elysian Fields kind of thing.
From Gladiator.
Like Gladiator,
right.
yes, absolutely.
But except they were green, not like not
weedy.
Not weedy.
Yeah,
this was tall green grass, and I remember just rubbing my hands against it like this, not like I was approaching anything, but almost just like feeling something physical for the first time. And I remember in heaven, as empty as it was, I could tangibly feel the feeling still of that grass. I don't know if this makes sense at all, right? You can feel it without actually having to touch it.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it was comforting. It was like an ASMR kind of texture kind of situation, but it was kind of a grounding reality of it all. And other than that, honestly, heaven was just heaven. I wish I could say it was the greatest place in the world, but it was because you didn't want or need or have to question anything. Everything was just there for you without having to be there. You didn't have to need or want it.
And that perception of time just disappears there.
Yeah, I know that was way gone. Yeah, way gone. Like it's still. So I mean, I could have been there for 5 seconds or 5 millennia. It was just there.
So, do you have? Was there any discussion throughout this entire ride, whether in heaven or hell or any place else, about karma, about samsara, about anything have to do with?
Yeah. Well, obviously, when you're in hell, you start questioning
Everything. Yeah.
Right? Because you are suddenly wondering why and how and what did I possibly do wrong? I don't think I killed anybody. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, the time that karma question came up in hell, there was a older African-American gentleman in another hospital room next to me for some reason. And he was there for moments. And we actually had interesting moments.
This was in real life?
No, this is in hell. This was in hell,
okay.
in the hospital room in hell. And I saw the nurses preparing a special meal for him, which included one nurse pulling down his pants and shoving feces down the old man's throat. He's been like 85 years old, weighed 70 pounds. And they were just torturing the crap out of him. And for some reason, that was his torture. Now, there's a whole backstory of why, probably, but that was his torture.
Sure. So you got to see other people's hells?
I think.
In a sense?
In a sense. I could feel them near me. Mm-hmm. I could feel it. And, and I don't know if he ever, first of all, I don't know if he's been there for 5 minutes or 5 years or 500 years. I don't know if he's still there right now or will be there when I go back, right? But what if the lesson that I eventually learned he hasn't learned yet? What if eventually he's supposed to accept or supposed to learn that it doesn't have to be that way and he hasn't figured it out yet? So I go back to your karma question.
Mm-hmm.
Who are we to judge what length that man should be in hell? So
only he can judge that.
I was there for a period of time. I've never killed anybody, I've never murdered anybody, never did that kind of stuff. But I was there. Even in the worst person, the worst killer, murderer, rapist, whatever else, even in the worst person, when do we say that enough is enough? Right? Am I right though? When does that enough is enough? When has he paid his dues in not just jail, but in literal hell? Right? Has his soul been cleansed and refined enough, as some of the religions would call it, like the Protestants and the Puritans would have gone through this whole refinement period in hell, all that kind of stuff? Or is he just there forever, for eternity, because he's such a bad human being?
So I had a medium tell me one time that somebody like Hitler, as an example, could never escape just because they were so
bad. Right.
Such a horrible individual that there's just no retribution they could ever pay.
Right.
I don't know if that's true,
BS.
though. I do too.
I don't buy it There always has to be redemption. There cannot be a path to nowhere.
Right.
on
But
some level.
even the idea of multiple levels of heaven means that there's always getting better.
Right.
Right? There's always a chance to improve even in death.
So David Hawkins talks about, I don't know if you know his work, but I know you read like a bunch of books, so it might be something to check out. He did a scale of 0 to 1,000 based on consciousness, 1,000 being like the great avatars, Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, and 0 being basically dead. Like 23 being like Komodo dragon level, and some of the world's dictators, they're kind of like on that level. And then you start to climb. But after 200, it becomes generative. Everything below 200 is fear, other stuff like that, guilt and shame being the lowest. And then 200 is a level of courage. And then above that, you start to move into a more generative state. But what he said was he experienced various levels of enlightenment. He used that term. The lowest, and he went to heaven, he went to hell as well. It was, and he speaks about it very similarly to what you speak about, which is why I think the reading his stuff you'd find it interesting. And a lot of it is, you're never getting out. It's hopeless, and it's forever. And it's like there's just never going to be. And then you figure out that it's not forever, ultimately. He said that an archangel pulled him out at that point. But took him to a bunch of stuff. But even in the heavens, he was going from thing to thing. And one of the heavens that was mistaken for real heaven was oblivion. And oblivion is like, oh, this is nice. It's quiet. Nothing's happening.
Yeah.
I could stay here forever, but you have to ultimately give that up.
Right.
And then you go to another place. So I'm wondering if third heaven for you wasn't ultimate heaven. It was just maybe another thing.
So I've heard this theory before, this concept before. So most religious people that I've spoken with would have said that my hospital time, that time in that hospital bed, was oblivion. They've related it to
oblivion is really nothing,
but it's also purgatory, right? So
no, two different things.
I've been purgatory, and so your definition may be two different things.
Yeah.
But the similarity of oblivion is that you could be empty without having nothing, right? Emptiness and nothingness are two very different things. It's like sitting still, and it's like sitting still and doing nothing. Two very different things, right? You could be in purgatory, and you're still in anticipation and waiting, right? There is that moment where you know there's another step coming, because purgatory is a stage in a series of stages you're following. Oblivion, by its nature, is nothingness, right? And you're not waiting or anticipating anything, right? But the knowledge that there's more removes that from being heaven.
So within you, there's a knowledge that there's more.
When I was in heaven, I felt totality. There was no anticipation. There was no feeling to look for more. There was nothing else you wanted.
Interesting.
There was no want, right? When you're in another stage, and every other stage, you knew there was another final boss stage, right? This no longer existed.
Interesting. Okay.
Right? And I think that's where the difference would have been, because in those moments of emptiness in hell, in the moments of hell, in moments of emptiness in purgatory, the reason it became empty is because there was more that you wanted. When you stop wanting that, you're good. And that was heaven. There was no more.
There's times in this life when, let's say, you're in the flow state. Right? So you don't want anything. It's a state of total. In that moment, you're just integrated, right? So you don't. So is that heaven?
No, but you still need stuff.
Oh, I see what you mean.
And your flow state ends.
Yes.
Right. I'm talking about never ending and never needing. It's a very hard thing to explain, because I still can't feel it. I've never felt it again, obviously, because my body still needs stuff. I still need stuff. Once that need goes away indefinitely.
So let's talk about. I mean, we've covered some amazing
We're all over
stuff
the place
today. No, but I think it's great. Let's talk about what what can you say? What do you want out of life now that you've had this kind of stuff? And what can you impart to others to get them to sort of have an understanding?
I have a very good friend of mine, a Catholic priest. We grew up since we were like 15, 14 years old together. Seen him do some bad stuff. He's seen me do some bad stuff. But, we went through different paths in life. I tell him all the time, I don't think I'm going back to heaven when I go through all of this cycles again. My heaven would never be heaven, knowing that African American man is potentially still in that hospital room getting tortured. Because the knowledge that those people or anybody can't get out or doesn't realize that there's a chance to get out or a way to get out, I could never be in heaven knowing that exists. If you had a loved one that was in hell, would heaven ever exist for you? Could you be in heaven knowing that?
Yeah, that's a great question.
It's a great question to ask.
Right?
Well, do you feel then that your role is almost to go back and help usher people out of hell?
I told my priest friend straight out, and he was like, "Are you sure about that?" I'm like, "Yeah." I think one of my roles is to not be back in heaven. Because I would never be satisfied knowing that there's people that can't find their way out. Not just people that I don't know, but what if my loved ones or anybody that I've ever met? What's that whole scale of 1 to 1,000 of terribleness, right? Who am I to say? I'm not your judge. Even if Hitler is there for an eternity, right? Maybe he should be. Maybe he should just be there for 1 billion years, but not eternity. Not 1,000,001 years, right? Who's supposed to quantify that? The tortures of hell surpass any kind of tortures any of our modern day prisons or even ancient stuff has ever given us, right? But we can quantify those. We can quantify somebody's, you're going to spend 4 lifetimes back to back in maximum security prison and all that kind of stuff, and then have a death penalty, when you're 105 years. We can quantify that for some reason, right? But the hell tortures are exponentially much more terrible and never ending.
Never end.
Right? So why would I be okay with that, knowing that somebody, anybody could be there? And I just don't know. For me, that just never made sense.
Do you also feel that when you were witnessing I don't know how many others you saw in hell, but did you feel that was imperative for you to learn any lesson?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I'm not sure they were meant to teach me a lesson per se. But, one of the differences that I've noticed with my near-death experience and other people is the amount of details that have come out with it. And I will say, when I was dead in heaven and hell, there was no thinking I was coming back. I was gone. I was not questioning, let me learn this, because when I go back to life, this is going to be an important lesson for me to know. But I think the real lessons that was learned more than anything else was, hey, Paulo, don't touch the fire. And I got to touch fire after fire after fire, just to know that I shouldn't be doing certain things or not doing certain things and everything else. I think those were the greatest lessons that I learned throughout the entire process.
So what can you relate? Because I know that one of the things that you mentioned to me the other day was you just don't care as much about certain things.
And care is a mean word.
Wanting to work.
Right. Yeah.
Other things, ways to approach life now that you're back here. So what can you impart to us, to everybody about that?
What if you did it 5 years ago? What if you started life 75 years ago? What if you did everything you said you are going to do or were doing years before, right? Or just start today.
But start today to do what?
Whatever it is you want to do. All those dreams and things you said, I'm going to hold off, I'm going to do it when I get there, when I'm ready, when I make this much money, I'm going to do this, or when I have free time, I'm going to do that. All those things, you'd be so much more advanced and forward in your life if you started them before, which you can't do, but you can start them now, right? The inevitability of death is impossible to beat. Death is the only, undefeated. It's going to win every single time. It's going to happen, right? We can't stop that fact. All we could do is enjoy the ride for what it is. Or we could suffer the crap out of this ride, and we're going to end up dying anyway, right? We just got to make that choice to either ride this out and enjoy it for everything that it is, or just suffer through it and get to the same destination anyway.
How do you enjoy life?
Today, be around my kids, be around my wife. Don't say no to a lot of things. Mm-hmm. I always joke around that I don't want to work. What I do for work now isn't what I was doing before. Right. This isn't work to me. Like, to me, this is fun. I love what I do now. I go out, I climb a mountain, I go hike, I go to the beach, I go for a jog. Like, I do the stuff that I want to do. And, I think every day is just a different ride. And when I look at some of the jumps I do, especially, when I talk about business and career-wise, there's no reason to not take chances because we're scared to fail. There's no reason. Failure, to me, is the same thing as a scale of that 0 to 1,000. A little failure or a big failure, it's still a failure, right? There's still a lesson to be learned by touching a fire. But the only lesson you don't do is if you never know what the definition of hot is, because you've never touched the fire before.
Absolutely. And if I could get personal for a second, Dave and I started this podcast over talking about cigars, a little over 2 months ago. And, if I never got paid for this, I'd still do it. Right. But I do want to get paid for it. And I want this to be our main thing that we do because I enjoy this pretty much more than anything else that I'm doing currently. So it's a wonderful thing. So, very excited to have you on and to have this conversation and hopefully to impart this to other people. Like, just, so approaching life is doing what you want, doing it now, not waiting until but when you're going about doing what you want and thinking about that, like, what's the energy that you're putting out there, right? So how do you link up to those things without that fear, right? So it's easy to say, well, don't have fear and just go and do, but like, how do we get people from point A to point B?
Yeah, it's really easy to be religious in church, right? Or if you're at a Christian retreat and you're around them for, it's really easy to not do bad things or to not have these wants and wills and all that kind of stuff. Really difficult when the world comes bogging down on you. The knowledge of more, the knowledge that life isn't finite, right? It's not going to end when we die. There's a whole universe, a whole world, whole other experiences we're going to have, is really, really comforting to me, right? Because I don't have to wonder if it's the end. And if we could leave that in the back of our heads, like, a failure in this lifetime, in this grand scheme of time that doesn't exist, is just a failure. Mm-hmm. And you're probably going to forget it because hopefully you have 1,000 more, right? I gave you the example last time we spoke about, what happened. Do you remember the last time you hit your toe? Mm-hmm. Did it hurt like hell?
Absolutely.
And you screamed, what the hell? Right. But did you think you suffered through life because of your stub toe? Why? Because it was just stub toe.
Exactly. It just goes on.
Right. Now, how long did that stub toe hurt for?
Couple seconds.
Okay. If your lifetime was 10 seconds long and you stubbed your toe in that 10 seconds, would you say you suffered through your life? Proportionally. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So if a cancer patient has cancer from when they're 1 year old to 15 years old and dies leukemia at 16 years old, would you say that person can't suffer through life?
True. Absolutely.
Right? Because we're quantifying life as that time frame. Mm-hmm. If we quantify life from this existence to the next existence, which is an eternally infinite amount of time, 15 years of suffering and a stubbed toe is the same amount of time proportionally. If you wouldn't say that you stub your toe is suffering because you lived 1,000 years, why would that person who had cancer 15 years, who lives 1,000 more years, think that that's suffering as well? right? I think we consider our failures and our suffering as proportionate to time. And when we remove that equation and knowing that there's so much more to do and so much more places that we're going to be in lifetimes that we're going to experience, none of these things are real pains and failures. They're just good lessons to have, and then we move on. We can't consider those things as suffering. And I think that to me has been just the greatest thing, just knowing that there's more time and there's more stuff to happen. Nothing is proportionately big enough to be a problem.
Why are we living these lessons to begin with? What's the mechanism that drives this whole thing? Was that ever explained?
Yeah. Well, for me, I don't know about everybody else. For me, those lessons got me out of hell. So those lessons gave me strength and faith and learning what was not wrong or right, but learning what would burn or not burn my hand. Where was everything I needed to have in my arsenal to help myself out of that experience. Right? Otherwise, we would be infinitely touching more fires forever. And I had to do it for lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, enough that I was okay to move on. And I think in my brain, God said, okay, you have enough tools to get out of hell now. Let's see what you could do. And I always feel like that it was almost a necessity to live those lives and go through hell in order for me to be clean enough to get to the next step.
So that was in, obviously, your death or ghostly state.
Yeah.
But what about in physical reality here?
Well, like I said, I think that what happened to me was one of the best experiences to ever happen. Not only because of the life and death, not only because of the after-death experience that I had, but it also taught me, one, my wife really loves me. I always make the joke that, my mother-in-law died a few years ago, and because of that, it really forced my wife to look at our life insurance and crap like that. My wife could have walked away and just let me die and be very, very well off for the rest of her life, right? Instead, she decided to save my life. And, she's a nurse. And what she did for me was she actually sought out the medication, which was still in trial, and got me moved from one hospital to the other. And even signed the waivers that if I die in transport, right, it's worth the risk.
Was that the hydroxychloroquine?
No, that would be remdesivir.
Oh,
That's
remdesivir.
right,
Okay.
remdesivir.
Yep.
And she, at that time, it was in trial. I was not, the hospital I was at was not doing any clinical trials for it. It was a much more smaller community hospital. And she got me moved to Jersey Shore Medical in Neptune, which was doing clinical trials. When I got to that hospital, after my wife signed all the stuff, the clinical pharmacist saw me being pulled in and removed the medication from one person and gave it to me instead. Right? I had a better chance at survival, only because of my age.
Triage, yeah.
Because of my age. I received the last dose of remdesivir in New Jersey in end of March.
And it only took one dose?
7 days. 7-day dose, right?
Protocol, so to speak.
Protocol, 7 days of it. My wife could have just left me at the first hospital, left it alone, and I would have never survived. My fever hit 107 while I was intubated a couple of times. 104, you're basically unconscious. At 107, if I survive it, I would be extreme brain damage.
Right.
Extreme brain damage. But
what is your current health, if you don't mind?
I'm still chugging, still alive.
Good.
6 months after I woke up, I did have a heart attack. A blood clot from the time while I was intubated, I traveled into my heart.
Oh, jeez.
Thankfully, the guys they're like, oh, pop a stent in, you're good to go.
Thank God for that.
My left lung at the time was fully scarred from the time of, on a breathing machine, pretty much. It's miraculously healed. Doctors said they could see almost no signs of scarring. To the point where a year after I got out of the hospital, and by the way, I got out of the hospital in 3 days after waking up. They were shocked that I forced myself to get up and walk after about 3 days and some stuff there. A year after I got out of the hospital, it would be April 10th. I ran a fundraiser from Center State Hospital to Jersey Shore as a fundraiser for both hospitals. And that was a 20-mile run.
Wow.
Just to get myself on my feet again. Right? it was one of those things where, I could either sit around waiting for my health to heal, which usually doesn't happen by itself, or I can get up and do something about it. And that's really, like I said, I either do it now or do it later. Why not just do it now?
That is incredible.
Yeah.
That is incredible. And honestly, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you,
today.
guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you for telling your story. Thank you for the advice that you've given us and to the listeners. And I think it's something that we all need to keep in mind. Do it now. Do what you want.
Don't procrastinate.
Listen, we're examples of us doing something that we love, and so are you. So, and so is Ming for that. Yes, absolutely. There he is. So thank you again, and really appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
And until next time, we are Brothers of the Arcana.
God bless.
Absolutely. See you soon.